get started.
Great. So hello, everyone. We're from PowerAdvocate, and we're very excited to be here and talk to you all today. We'd like to start with a quick presentation first on making the most of your summer before getting into our Q&A session.
So to start off the introductions, hello, I'm Emily. I am the current Devops co-op at PowerAdvocate. I am double majoring in computer science and philosophy, and I'm from Louisville, Kentucky.
Hi everyone, my name's Mike. I'm a software engineer 1. I just graduated from Northeastern back in December and started full-time in January. I'm a former co-op from fall of 2019, and for anyone who doesn't know what the co-op program is, it's something where we're partnered with Northeastern for like 6-month-long internships.
I'm Megan. I'm a software engineer co-op at PowerAdvocate, started in January. I'm a second-year student at Northeastern studying computer science and design, and I'm originally from Madison, Wisconsin.
Hi everyone, I'm Cindy. I'm originally from China, and I immigrated here in 2011. I graduated from Northeastern University in 2010 with double major computer science and business. I joined PowerAdvocate in the end of 2012. Had a lot of fun in the company, learned a lot, and I got recruited by Alex.
Guess I'll go next. I'm Alex Joe. I'm a director of tech operations at PowerAdvocate. I've been working here for 12 years, and I started as a co-op in 2009 at Northeastern University, and I have lived in Massachusetts my entire life.
Okay, so to start us off, we just wanted to make like a quick what our presentation is going to be about, the main goal of our presentation. And it's just to say that no matter what you do over the summer, you will be fine. And so to kind of give some examples of that, me and some of the other co-ops, or me, Mike, and Megan, we're going to give just some examples of kind of how we feel about the whole thing. And so I wanted to give an example of my sophomore year where I was starting the summer semester and I was incredibly just depressed, unmotivated. I didn't really want to do anything except lay in my bed. And I kind of reached a breaking point where I decided I'm not really having fun learning what I'm learning. I'm going to try something new. And at that point, I'd been doing computer science stuff for a year and a half. And I decided I was going to take a course I had really would not benefit my major, was objectively not a smart choice. However, I ended up taking this little course on Unity games, just game making, and it was the best summer I think I've ever had just for me mentally. I ended up learning so much, and I had this new kind of passion for understanding computer science and new goals for what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And even if the choices you make right now aren't objectively the best, you're not picking something that will benefit your major, you're smart, you'll make good decisions. You're not going to decide something stupid, and you'll ultimately be okay.
To kind of add on to that, even though our presentation is about how to make the most of your summer, we really want to emphasize that there's no need to constantly be busy with trying to improve your technical skills or getting more work experience. If that's what you love to do and it's your passion, that's great. You should keep doing it. But I think most people need breaks every now and then and need some time off to do things that make them happy, whether that's spending time with family or traveling with friends or exploring a new hobby. So I usually tell people last summer that I worked on a personal project during summer 1 and took classes summer 2, but I also spent hours playing this card game with my family, and I took a road trip with them to Green Bay, and I watched TV because those things all made me happy and helped me not feel burned out, and I'd say I'm doing just fine right now. So even though we're here to talk about how to make the most of your summer, don't take that to mean you should only do these things and nothing else, because finding a healthy balance is really, really important.
All right, and just to continue piling onto this idea one more time. So the most important thing that you can do for your career during the summer is to do what makes you happy. For some people that might be grinding an internship and doing side projects. For some people that could be traveling, could be spending time with friends and family in your hometown, maybe working part-time, something like that, or could be pursuing a new hobby. And just for a personal example, my first summer out of college, I lucked into a last-second internship because of a connection I had. But before that, I was working at Home Depot just to make some extra money, just playing a lot of basketball with my friends. And I was completely happy with that being what my summer like would be if that was the case. You only have less than a handful of summer vacations while in college. So while there's not a lot of opportunities to do what you want. So you need to make the most of that by doing what you want. It might be the last time that you get to try out a job in a specific discipline that you want to gauge your enjoyment in, or it might be the last time you'll be able to hang all together with all your high school friends one last time before you all graduate college and move on even further into your separate ways. But still, in the end, no matter what you choose to do, all that matters is that it'll make you happy.
All right, so to start off, I just wanted to give like a couple tips about summer coursework that I've learned a little bit about. And I think the most important one that I have had is just balancing your workload. So I know myself, and I know that I cannot take like a bunch of like really heavy courses over the summer. Some people can. I am not that person. And so what I have found is that if I take like one harder course and one easy course, that is what works for me and makes me the happiest. And another thing that I think is really important for over the summer courses is just that everything is so much faster. And so my freshman year, I was really anxious to ask for help. I was just very shy. And so my first summer kind of like kicked me into like, I need to ask for help or I'm going to be like really far behind. And so asking for help is very important, and they're there to help you. You will be okay. And also remember to still keep time for yourself. It's summer. It's very nice out. It's very important just to not get too burnt out. And then I think ultimately you just need to understand kind of what works for you. So I think sometimes, and for me especially, when I'm making my summer courses, I pick courses that I think would be like for the ideal me. And so that never works out because like I might pick classes at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. I don't wake up that early. That doesn't work for me. And so picking classes like and being realistic that like I can only take afternoon courses is what works for me. So before you pick your courses, maybe just consider like, these are the times that work for me. I think this is what I'd be most interested in. Realistically, like this could be something I could learn fast paced. And now we're going to transfer over to Mike, who will talk about summer internships.
Yeah, so some of you, maybe you had an internship last summer, maybe some of you have internships this summer. And while that would mostly apply to those people, it's still some good general knowledge about internships. So first, I'm just going to start just actually an intro about my last summer. And so for a while, I always wanted to get an internship out in the Bay Area just to see what things are like on the other coast. I've lived in Massachusetts my whole life. Then like this past summer, I was supposed to have a really cool internship in San Francisco, but COVID kind of messed all that up and it shifted to being remote. So I didn't get my moving stipend anymore. So I never ended up going to San Francisco. And the internship was also shortened from 3 months to 2 months. Both those things were pretty like big bummers, but it also made me have to think about how I can make the most of such a short amount of time. And it really made me focus on my goals of what I want to achieve during those 2 months. So that's why the first point I'm going to talk about is that summer is a short amount of time. And because of that, it can feel tough sometimes, feel like you really accomplished a lot in only 3 months, 2 months, however long you might be doing that job. I luckily before this past summer had already done my co-op at PowerAdvocate, and that gave me a lot of good experience. So I was able to hit the ground running right away. But the 2 or 3 summers ago, my first internship I had almost no experience. I just had 1 year of college. And so I really felt like I didn't get all that much done because I just wasn't very experienced and wasn't able to pick it up real quick. The thing about this though is that, it's okay. It's not something you should really stress yourself out about, because more than anything, you should be treating this internship like a learning opportunity. One other thing that's okay is it's okay if that role isn't something that you enjoy. You're not strapped down to it like a full-time job. One of the best benefits of the role only lasting a few months is that once you're done, you can move on from it. Maybe it's something you want to come back to and pursue. Maybe it's not. Still, ultimately, it might end before you finish everything that you want to do, but still, hopefully it was a long enough time to figure out whether that is something you want to do. So now the next major topic to talk about is setting goals. I personally think it's very important to try to set goals with your supervisor or mentor and work in ways you can improve both soft skills and hard skills. And so connecting back to my first internship, I didn't have any goals like that. My supervisor was pretty distant, but at my co-op at PowerAdvocate, it was something that they really cared about working with all their co-ops, and something I really enjoyed and then brought on to my internship this past summer. A lot of internships will likely have a structured plan for the work that you're going to do. So it might make it somewhat hard to create some open-ended goals. But if this is the case, you definitely want to try to work with your supervisor, mentor, to incorporate work or some more learning opportunities that interest you that might be outside of what they directly have planned. Because in the end, like I said before, the internships are mainly supposed to be a learning opportunity. So you shouldn't be afraid to mention to your supervisor that you want to learn and look for ways to learn new things. Another thing about goals is that they can be flexible. As internship goes on, even though it is a short amount of time, you might discover some new technology you want to learn, or maybe there's something that you thought you were interested in doing and now you don't want to. It's okay to flip-flop a little with your goals. Now, lastly, in parallel to setting goals, there's also feedback as well. If you're not getting enough feedback from your manager, then try to reach out and see how you're doing, what's going well, and what needs improvement. Now, I said lastly there, I shouldn't have went to the next last bullet point, but the last major part of this slide is that you want to try to reach out and connect with coworkers as much as possible, especially with us being remote. You miss all those little opportunities to kind of just walk by someone's desk and shoot up a little quick conversation with someone. So one of the things that I did in my last internship that was remote was I utilized the company's organization chart to find people on other teams to reach out to. And luckily I was working at a large company, so there were a lot of options for reaching out to other developers and other directors of engineering and similar positions like that. And so I took advantage of that, messaged a couple people, set up little 30-minute meet and greets. And so if that is something that you are able to do, I would definitely recommend it. And you're never going to have those opportunities to just see these people outside of your team for the most part. You might have a team of maybe 5 to 10 people. You'll interact with them a lot, but to really expand out to the rest of the company, something that you are most likely going to have to take an initiative on. And if that is something you're interested in, then definitely don't be afraid to reach out to people. And in my example, I only talk to software development adjacent people, but if there are other positions in the company that you're interested in, maybe you want to know what it's like to be a product manager, maybe you want to know what it's like to work in HR or finance. This is another really good opportunity to just reach out to someone in those fields just to talk for 30 minutes to learn about what they do in their role. So it all just comes back once again to that. The internship is about learning, and you want to learn. Is this something I want to do? Is this the career that I want to move forward with?
All right. So I can talk about personal projects a little bit. As a full disclaimer, I've only done a personal project over the summer one time, and it was last summer. But I think it's a really fantastic thing to do all around because, one, you kind of get to choose the schedule and how much you want to work on it. Two, having an interesting project that wasn't a class assignment looks pretty good on a resume, and it gives you a lot to talk about during interviews. And thirdly, you get to learn about something that interests you and work on something you find really cool. So if you have the time and interest, I would 100% recommend spending some time over the summer working on a personal project. So how do you get started? The first thing is to kind of figure out what interests you and what you want to learn more about. For me, that was web development and full stack web applications, but I've also seen people interested in mobile applications or game development come up with very cool personal projects. Next, you want to come up with a project idea. So it's perfectly fine if it's something that's already been done, as long as it'll give you the opportunity to learn new things as you go. I decided to make a web application to help my high school volunteering club keep track of volunteering events, which isn't the most amazing app idea, but it was a full stack project that helped me learn a lot about databases and backend technologies like Node and Express. So I found the whole experience very rewarding and educational. Could we move forward 2 bullet points? Okay. The next thing is to learn new things as you go. Obviously, I think this is one of the best parts of working on a personal project is that you get to learn so much just by doing and solving problems you run into as you're working. Some people like to just dive into the work and Google things as they go along, which is totally fine. I knew absolutely nothing about backend and Node before I started, so I actually took a Udemy course on these things before starting the project. Either approach is fine. Again, I think the point here is to use the personal project to learn, so how you do it is entirely up to you. The last thing is if you're starting out and feel a little bit lost about what to do, what to Google, what tech stack to use, if you're building a web application, you should get some help from other people. All I knew when I was starting was that my project required a backend, but I had no clue where to even start. So I talked to an upperclassman with some experience in web development, and he suggested looking into some of these technologies like React, Node, Express, which gave me a really helpful starting point. I would also recommend working with other people if you can. It's a good opportunity to learn from others through pair programming and to teach someone else what you know. It's also a good way to kind of keep yourself accountable and keep making progress on your project by having someone else to work with or at least check in with regularly. I will say that it can be very hard to balance a personal project with classes or an internship. It's probably a little easier to do when you're working since your evenings and weekends are normally free, but it is still easy to feel burned out if you're coding during work and coding after work. So just make sure to take days off from your personal project when you need it and kind of set those boundaries for yourself. Obviously, your schedule is harder to predict when you're in classes and have all these exams and homework assignments, which is why I actually don't usually work on personal projects when I'm in class. But I definitely enjoy having a side project to work on a couple times a week after my day at PowerAdvocate or during longer breaks from school like winter or summer break. So I'll pause here if anyone has questions about anything I said. We do still have like a Q&A session at the end, but I'll take any like urgent questions about anything here.
I have a question. Have
Yeah.
you ever participated in a hackathon and had a project that you've actually continued? And like, how have you gone about that if you don't have access to your team from a hackathon anymore or anything like that? Do you have any advice on how to do that?
That's a great question. I did one hackathon last spring. It was like my first one. I knew like nothing, but it was still a very fun experience to kind of work with people who had more experience. I did not continue the project afterwards, mostly because I didn't know how to like deploy things to like, I think it was AWS, whoever deployed our actual application somewhere. But if you're interested in continuing a project, I don't think it's a bad idea to just like stay in touch with your hackathon team and see if anyone still wants to keep working together after that.
Thanks. Angel.
Yeah, so I just had a quick question for Megan. So you said that you created the personal project for your high school?
Yep, for like a club I was involved in high school.
Yeah. So how did you like, because you were making the project for a group of people, how did you communicate on what the objectives of the project were, and did you ever have to like readjust your goals for the project?
Yeah, so I didn't like sign an agreement with them beforehand, like I will do this, I will have this deliverable product. It was more of like a summer thing where I was like, I'm not sure if I can do this. I think it would be cool if I can try it. And if it turns out to be successful, then I'll like reach out to the club and see if they want like more like features or whatever it is. And I was like super involved in this organization like through all 4 years of high school. So I had a very strong understanding already of like what they would want and what they would find useful. So I kind of worked on my own for like a month or so. And then once I had kind of like a minimum viable product, I guess you could call it, I reached out to the advisor, gave them like a demo of what I had, and they gave me some more feedback. And so yeah, kind of went on from there. It's not deployed yet because the school wanted to host the project on their own like infrastructure, but their infrastructure was like very, I guess like occupied this last year with like virtual learning. So it's not like a live thing yet.
Got it. Thank you, Megan.
I think we can move on to the next slide.
So before we talk about tips about how you can be prepared for your future opportunities, I kind of want to share my own story with you. So one summer, a friend of mine all of a sudden called me and said, hey, my supervisor is trying to hire someone, which made me think of you or your brother. Are you guys interested? Can you send me your resume if you are? And I was like surprised and of course like excited. But then immediately I was like, oh no, our resumes are not ready to send out yet. So what we did, what my brother and I did, is like we worked through our resume the whole night until like 1 a.m. And at the end, the final version of the resume weren't even that good, but we had to rush it. So from this, what I learned from this stressful experience is you don't know when a job opportunity will land on you. And it's better to be proactive than reacting to the opportunity like that. So let me ask all of you a question. If I have a job opening today and it matches your interest and qualification, can you send me your resume today? If your answer is not an immediate yes, I would say let's take advantage of this summer to be more prepared. So let's start with LinkedIn. Thank you. So believe it or not, most of the potential employer actually look in your LinkedIn profile when they want to know a little bit more about you. So it's very important that you have to have your LinkedIn up to date before job hunting. So a couple points. First is the profile picture. It's probably the first thing that captures the potential employer's eyes. So you want to pick a picture that you look confident and pleasant and give your best impression. So the next thing is connection, or I call network. It takes time to build up your network. So that's why it's better to start early instead of last minute. Otherwise, your potential employer look at your LinkedIn profile and see like very few of a connection. It looks where see like it's not as polished as what they thought. Next thing is the things that I look at the most is experience and education. Under the experience, of course, if you have professional job experience to list it with the timeline, it will be the best. But if you don't have any yet, it's totally okay. You can list any academic related work experience, such as being a tutor for a class or working on an academic project with a group of people. Feel free to put it there. It also helps. For education part, you can put down your college degree and high school education along with all the achievement and award that you got. I think both LinkedIn and your resume contains very similar information, but the biggest difference is the resume usually is limited to 1 to 2 page versus the LinkedIn, you can list as many information as you want to make you a very competitive candidate. Lastly, under the skill, don't forget to list it in. It's a nice summary to list out all your current skill set related to your degree, but you can also list out other skills such as drawing, playing music instrument, all that kind of skill to make you like to stand out a little more. Can we move on to the resume part? Great. So when you create your resume, the format and template actually it's kind of important. There's so many tools out there that you can use to make your resume stand out. For me, I actually spend more time reading on resume that capture my eyes with those nice formatting and template. So take advantage of this. The next part is the next thing like relevant courses work experience, academic project, your skill set, extracurriculum, and personal interest are the key elements on your resume. So if you have all of them, trying to fit them all in. Remember not to skip the personal interest. When I screen resume, it's actually my favorite part of reading the resume, because that's how I usually connect to the candidate, because you see so many resume, and for those, I usually connect them through personal interest. The next thing I want to talk about is always send your resume to other people for proofreading. You don't want to have too many typos or catch all the grammar error before you submit your resume to any of the employers. Get feedback from people who are experienced and see what kind of improvement you can make to make your resume more appealing. Lastly, reference. So find the people who you trust and ask their permission in advance, such as their phone number and contact number, like to see if they're okay that you put them put them as a reference. For PowerAdvocate, when we're hiring interns or co-op, we don't really do reference check. However, I do have other employer call me for reference check, even they are just hiring for interns. So you never know when you need them. So it's always better to ask those people in advance instead of like last minute. So remember, the update, keep your LinkedIn profile and resume update is a continual process. As the time goes on, you gain more experience and skills, and you can add them to your LinkedIn profile and resume. Especially like right now, it's approaching the end of your semester. You must have learned a lot, and it's time to, so you can add those to your resume and feel proud of what you have achieved so far. So this concludes the last topic of our presentation. We can move on to open up to the floor or for questions.
And if anyone doesn't want to unmute and speak, you can also put things in the chat and we can share that as well.
We also have some sample questions if you guys are like having a hard time coming up with questions.
Angel.
Okay, so I did have questions of my own, but this list is pretty great. I was wondering if like we could talk about the second one. How did you figure out what field within computer science you're interested in?
I mean, I'll go first. So like in like school, like starting out, you learn pretty broad stuff about computer science, and then like I took a web development class right before I actually did my co-op at PowerAdvocate, and that's the work that we do here is full stack web development. So I took the web development class. I really enjoyed the fact that there are a lot of different like technology that you can be using while doing it. So like one of the things I didn't like when talking to other people about their experiences in other internships and stuff like that is like, oh, I just sit down and I write stuff in Python to scrape websites. I do this one thing, but specifically in our field, like being a full stack developer, I really enjoy the fact that you're not set into this one language or this one technology that you kind of just only really do. It's very open to maybe you want to incorporate a new technology in. Like we've had developers and co-ops that came in, so like, hey, what if for this new microservice we want to use Kotlin now, which is like a Java similar language. Like there's those opportunities there to be able to bring in new technology like that, and something I really enjoyed. And then I ended up doing it my last summer internship where that was also full stack development. So I kind of lucked into two jobs where I really enjoyed what I did. So that's why I kept going with it. But then also like going through classes, like I just didn't really find the enjoyment in doing stuff like networks or like computer systems stuff, like I did with the work that I do now. So it ended up being a little easy, but some of that can just be luck. Like maybe you just don't find the job that you really enjoy at first. Like it might take a little while.
To also kind of add on to that, I'm a second year. I am not like sure about which area of computer science I'm interested in, but like my experience with personal projects, my experience with web development at PowerAdvocate, also like some project work that I do in some of the CS clubs I'm involved in, have all kind of helped me realize I really enjoy web development. So I think like that's kind of like classes, personal projects, internships definitely can all kind of help you figure out what interests you and what you're maybe not as passionate about.
I can also say that like I don't know what I'm doing quite yet. I'm 3 years in. I have ideas of what I like, but I'm not like, wow, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. But what I found really helpful was that when I was looking at job postings, I made kind of a list of things that I had liked from my classes and looked at like, you know, what the job responsibilities were for different tech positions. Like, wow, that looks really interesting. I could maybe do something like that. And so that gave me ideas of sort of the things I might want to do when, I don't know, I'm a big adult and I have a real job.
To jump in a little bit, I major in computer science and business and concentrate on finance, and had a co-op in some of the financial institutions. I thought I would like the finance part of it, of my job. Turns out that after being in a job for 1 year full time, I didn't find that I was super interested. So I end up, that's why I got recruited by Alex. He said like, oh, whatever PowerAdvocate is doing, it's kind of cool. Why don't you check it out? So that's how I switched to PowerAdvocate, and I loved web development way more. I am interested. So what I want to say is, it is true that if you don't have a job or personal project or like an academic project to try out, you don't exactly know if this is what you sign up for is what you want to do for the rest of the life. But it's totally okay when you realize you don't like what you sign up for and it's switch. Because I felt like within computer science, it's not that hard to switch from one area to the other area. So, because the foundation is mostly the same, except data science. I think, I don't know about how easy to switch from regular computer science to data science. So I just wanted to say to you that I switch and I feel perfectly fine.
Thank you.
We also have a question in chat that asks, how do you stand out with your resume when you have very limited work experience? And I also kind of want to add to that and say, how do you stand out in the interview as well, especially for internships that might have technical interviews and you don't really have a lot of experience, but you want to learn, and that's what you're interested in pursuing?
I guess I can start first because I was helping out the company. We have a group to screen resume. So we have tons of resume to screen. How to stand out is like when you don't have work, a lot of people don't have like work experience, especially like in Northeastern, the second year co-op, they haven't have a co-op experience, so they haven't have any work experience yet. So most of the people don't have work experience, and turns out PowerAdvocate still hire a lot of people. Actually, it's the first time. So we look at something extra outside of your classes, such as you did want if any volunteer work you do, or any clubs you attend, if you are a certain important role in the club, such as like the president or the vice president or other roles. It also helped being tutor of classes, working on like Megan said, personal project. If not personal project, then classwork. Those are all help. Even like we have seen a lot of Eagle Scout kind of outside of a college, those activities, we took those into account because it does take your time to do this kind of activity. So I think I can cover this. I may miss some, and other people can help me out to fill it in. For the interview, how do you stand out? I would say you don't have to purposely behave differently than who you truly are. To me, I felt like interview is kind of like a dating in a way. We have to like you, you have to like us as well. And so the best way to go for it is being the true you. So just being honest when you don't know certain things, just say you don't know, but it doesn't mean you won't know, right? You will learn from then on. And on the technical part, we don't really, we care more about how you approach the problem, what's your thinking process, instead of the answer you written down. We care how you communicate, how you break down the problem into small pieces, and how you solve them. So we care more about that instead of you just writing down the answer and all that.
I'll add on a little there. Right? Like additionally with what we're looking for, what we're doing, behavioral and like technical interviews, is we're really trying to see if the candidate is someone that we would like to work with, especially at our company. Like we do a lot of paired programming, and so that type of level of being able to interact and feed off of each other's work, stuff like that, is really important to us. So we kind of have a little bit of a pairing element to our interview, but just in general, I think that is a really key thing, because you could be the smartest person in the world, but if you're really tough to work with, then it might be kind of hard to get into certain companies where they expect you to be communicating with a broader team. You know, like sometimes like we'll get a person that is more of that lone wolf, and you know they get everything right. It just isn't the right cultural fit, isn't the right working fit. And so like personally, that's something that I really find important, is can I work with that person? So like that doesn't require you to stand out and like, oh, I do this super extreme technical way to solve this problem, and I to do every leak code problem. Like, just are you very like talkative when working with you? Do you talk through your steps? You take some of the feedback well. A lot of the little things like that that add up that I think are really important. Alex, do you have anything to add on this since you're
I do. So
yeah.
Let me recap the two questions, right? The first question being, how do I stand out in a resume? And the second one being, how do I stand out in an interview, correct? The first question, how do I stand out on a resume? Well, this is kind of tricky because the short answer is you stand out on your resume by having things that are remarkable, right? So obviously, if you have, awards, if you have hackathons, if you have personal projects, if you have all these other things, like, then you should put them on there. But I think that people already have that advice. So I feel like the question's almost like, what if I don't have any remarkable things about me? How do I stand out on a resume? And the short, honest truth is you can't, right? It's like pretty difficult. If there's something to put on there, then there's something to put on there. I would encourage people in those scenarios to put a blurb. I think that I've seen that in some resumes. I've reviewed a lot of resumes in my lifetime, and I've interviewed like over 200 people. So I have a lot of experience like scanning through resumes and then also interviewing them. But putting like a small blurb on the top about yourself and like why you're interested, why you're passionate, and why somebody would hire you, that's a good way to do it, right? It's like, hey, here's a paragraph like, hey, I came from a very unusual background. I started as, for example, a finance major, and then I ended up, falling in love with computer science. I really love algorithms in particular. And something like that can help you stand out from everybody else who has, more work experience, more personal experience, whatever it is. So that's the short advice I can give you on a resume. Regarding the actual interview itself, I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what Sydney said, which is, it's a two-way street, but more so, you have already passed or failed an interview before you even step in through the door, right? I think a lot of people don't really recognize that. They see interviews as tests of like performance. It's like, it's different than it is in school, right? When you go to school and you go in class and you take a test at the end of the course, you're expected to pass, right? You know what the material is. You've probably had a practice exam. You know all the units. You're supposed to have prepared and studied. You're supposed to pass the test, but that's not true of an interview, right? Interviews aren't fair. They're not designed to be fair. An interview is designed to figure out, hey, the company has a particular need. Do you fit that need? If you don't fit that need, right, and the company can't tell that based on your resume, but they think you might, they'll bring you in for an interview. But you might not be you might not have the skills required to be in that position, right? For example, like let's make a very simplistic analogy. Let's imagine that companies cared about how fast you could run a mile, right? And you're like, oh, I'm a pretty good runner. I can run a 6-minute mile, okay? And the company's like, hey, we're looking to hire more runners. When you want to come in, you want to audition? You're like, great. You come in and the company's like, okay, can you run a mile for us? And you run a 6-minute mile, or let's say, a 5:55, feeling good about yourself, you ran a personal best. And the company's like, well, sorry, we're not going to take you. And you're like, wait, what? I ran a personal best. Like, this is literally the best that I've ever done. And the company's like, oh, but we need somebody who runs like a 5:15 mile. And then you realize there was no way that I ever could have gotten this job, right? There's no chance that you could do anything differently in this interview to be able to pass that interview. And I know it feels bad to be rejected because all of us hate rejection and never feels good, but you have to realize that there's a lot of information that's not always clear and transparent going into it, right? In the same way that you can show up, right? And we can love you as a candidate, and we can try to charm you and sell you and all the great things that we can do, but we never had any chance, right? I've interviewed plenty of candidates who never plan on working for us and we're using as practice for other companies, which I think is kind of rude. But like that's another example, right? There's nothing that, and we analyze afterwards, like, oh, we love this candidate, like, could we have done anything differently? When we talk about it, like, no, realistically, they never wanted to work here. So it goes both ways. So my biggest advice there is simply not to be discouraged. As Cindy says, go in there. You're going to be at a certain experience level, certain, knowledge of skills, and whatever your current talent level is in terms of how much time, experience, and problem-solving skills that you've built up so far. Just go in there, and it is what it is, right? Don't freak out about not getting the job, because again, there's very little at that point that you can control, right? An interview is just trying to check in, like, hey, at this stage of your career, does it make sense for you to work here? And it might not. Right? But it doesn't mean that if it's not now, it doesn't mean that it isn't later. There's a lot of stories of when people work for Google who would apply like 5 times until eventually they got in, right? And often it was just random chance, because for Google, people talk about, oh, like you get a really hard programming problem, but sometimes it's a programming problem people have seen before, in which case it's really, really easy, right? So then it can be just like luck of the draw, like, hey, did I happen to get the right problem that's right for me, that like on this particular day, the stars align and I get the job. So that's my biggest advice.
And I have to add on, we all get rejected at least once for job interview. It's totally okay. So I know it's like Alex said, being rejected is never fun, but if you look back, it's like, oh, it's just nothing. Good experience, bad experience is still experience to grow you.
I have a question about networking. I will be the first to admit that I'm not great at maintaining relationships after an internship. But I think a lot of it is I'm not necessarily sure how and when is appropriate to reach out. Like, when do you say like, hey, hi, I don't, like, do you check in and tell them what you've been doing? Do you only reach out when you have a question? Or like, how do you maintain that relationship that it's not you just popping up again when you need something or want something, but actually maintaining that relationship while also not bombarding someone with updates or anything?
I can chime in here because maybe I have the most experience in this space. So the first thing is, I think a lot of us are bombarded throughout our lives with the advice that networking is super important to every job that you'll ever get, right? And it's really, really important to your career. And one of the things that I found most surprising when I entered the actual, workforce as a full-time employee is that wasn't true. At least it wasn't for me and for like a lot of the close people that I knew. Because in the field of software development, at least, it's, in my opinion, not really true, right? The reality is the vast majority of the time, there's a tremendous amount of demand for software developers. Virtually every company that does any software development is looking for more software developers. Like, the very few companies are like, no, we have enough, don't worry. Like, if we get a good software developer, like who comes knocking on our door, we're going to turn them away. Like, pretty much every developer, every company that does development is going to want more software developers. So basically any company has job openings, A, right? And B, when they interview you, it's not going to be like, oh, do you know somebody who works there? It's going to be like, hey, can you code? Like, can you code? Do you know our tech stack? Do you know our processes? Do you understand the software development lifecycle? Whatever it is. So I would say that for the most part, it's not really important, especially when you kind of like start your career and through the early stages. When you start heading to like the team lead and like middle management level, like engineering manager or director level, I think then it becomes a lot more important, because obviously the technical skills start kind of falling off a little bit, and it's a lot more about the social, interpersonal, right opportunity at the right time kind of thing, right? If I was a software developer, like at our company, it's like SE1, SE2, SE3, SE4, then software architect, director. So if I was like an SE1 or SE2, somebody who's like a few years of experience, I could leave PowerAdvocate and I could find a job basically anywhere else right away. But if you're a director, trying to find a job somewhere else is much harder, because there aren't that many director positions available, right? It's a very specific role, and a company might have 40 developers but only one director, so that's kind of like, it's a little tricky to figure it out. But still following up, I still think networking is never a bad thing, right? And I would say, how do you network is, for the people that you interacted with, that you had a pleasant interaction with and had a pleasant relationship with, spend some effort and keep in touch with them. And not just the general pleasantries, which is like fine, but I've always been flattered when I've had previous people work at PowerAdvocate, whether they be co-ops or full-timers, who reached out to me, who asked me for advice, right? I think that's probably the most common thing. They're like, hey, look, I have 2 job offers, company A and company B, right? Company A pays more, but company B works in this cool technologies, but I don't know if those technologies are gonna stick around. Like, what do you think, right? Or somebody who emails me and it's like, hey, look, I was co-op at PowerAdvocate, I'm finishing my degree now. Should I get a PhD or should I enter the workforce? Right? That's another really common question that I get. And those really come about because I had interaction with them while they were here, either they're on my team or a mentorship role or whatever. And they liked my advice and they wanted more of my advice. And obviously I'm happy to provide it. It's no problem for me. In fact, I enjoy doing it. And so that also is flattering on my side to get that kind of request. So I think that's the shorter response I can give to your comment about networking is, find people that you like talking to, who are wise and who give you good advice, and keep asking them for more advice. And then they'll remember you in the future. And like, if I were to go somewhere else and I was looking for people to hire and I didn't want to bring them from PowerAdvocate, I'd be like, oh, look, I've interacted with some people who I worked with before who are now at other companies. I'd reach out to them.
Yeah. So for me, I'm not a very, I don't know how to say it. Like, I don't think I do a very good job of like keeping up with my previous coworker. But I would say, like, you want to make it happen naturally instead of kind of like, I only need you when I need you. So I would say, like, birthday, holiday, all that kind of thing. Like, just say hi, like check in, like, oh, how are you doing? And see if they have time to respond back to you. And you can share a little bit what you're doing, and then they may share a little. So it's to keep that positive relationship. I do agree with Alex that their previous co-op or intern, they can reach out. They feel free to reach out to me saying like, hey, I am looking for a job. Is your company hiring? This is totally great, because like our company also like actively hiring developer. So this is okay, totally okay when you ask things like that. Asking for advice, I think that we are very happy to share our personal experience and opinion or advice to help other people. It makes us feel good. So don't worry about that if you have to reach out to ask that kind of question. Just for me, like like Alex said, connect to the people that you really care, that you really enjoy working with, and make it natural. Make an effort to say hi to them on holiday occasion or birthday, or even seeing on Facebook, comment on, leave a comment, keep it connected. But it doesn't have to be every day or like every week. It doesn't have to be so frequent, but you don't want to totally stop.
That was helpful. Thank you. Yeah, Angel.
I have another question for Megan. So you mentioned that to learn about web development, you like using Udemy. I'm wondering if like the coursework courses you took on Udemy covered most of what you needed to know. And if not, how did you fill in the gaps in your knowledge as you were doing your personal project?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for like this full stack web application I was working on, I knew like the front end stuff like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, but all the back end stuff like Node, Express, how to connect the back end to a database. Taking like a course, one of the Udemy courses I picked had like a project component where like the person was leading you through like basically setting up like a full stack web application. So that was like a very helpful tutorial. I did run into problems where like, okay, I want to use a different database from what this person used. It's like a different technology. So then it's kind of just like Googling things, like reading some Medium articles or finding like other YouTube videos. Also, like if you know people who are experienced in these things, they would probably be happy to help you. I had like a family friend who knew about like SQL databases, so he was able to help me with like learning how to write SQL queries.
We have another question from Liz.
Yeah. Hi. So my question is kind of in regards to Mount Holyoke CS students, and their experience within like the major and the industry. So since we're not like a technical school, in my experience, I found it hard to take like more than one CS course or like relevant coursework in a semester. I typically find that I have to take like one CS course, maybe I can take a relevant math course, but then with the progression of our courses, it's hard to gain a lot of experience at the beginning if you're just starting with computer science. So what kind of skills or what kinds of skills should we like highlight on or try to work on? Well, we only have a limited amount of education we can get while in school, I guess, if that makes sense. Just because like the liberal arts education is pretty distributed across the spectrum.
How many classes do you take that semester?
Typically 4 to 5. Five
Okay.
load, but like if you're just starting out, or if you're like a first or a second year, you can typically only take one computer science class, and you're just learning the basics of like one language or the basics of a second one.
I would say that in Northeastern, so we do have 4 courses per semester, but I guess I see that the first year and the second year, they should at least have 4 computer science courses before they're applying their first internship job. However, I would say the concept, the computer science concept is important. It helps you to understand how to write program. So that needs to be learned first. And then in Northeastern, I guess at first, official course will be like teaching the student Java. And after that, it's just still Java. Then the Northeastern student will apply internships. So I wouldn't say that the education in Northeastern are way ahead than your school's education. So when you apply job, it's the best to look for the job that you already have some background in. Like if you already learned Java or other language, apply job who ask for those skills first. So to me, that will match it. Like it's easier to get qualified for the internship. I think that once you learn one language, hopefully it's not too hard to learn a different language, because even though different language kind of have their pros and cons, but the foundation pieces are actually not too different from each other. So if you have time, I truly believe, to be honest, I actually started taking courses in Udemy as well. And I do find some of the course they offer are very structured. Like they teach you the basic and then start building on top of it. I find that YouTube or LinkedIn Education, I forgot what it's called, they offer something similar, but Udemy so far is the most structured way to learn something. So I almost feel like I don't have to take a official college course to learn something on my own. And especially I can just take my own pace like learn when I have the free time and stop a day or two if I don't have the free time. So I encourage you, there's another way to prepare yourself like that. So there's a web development, there's a JavaScript. Udemy has lots of courses to offer.
I just wanted to add on to that. So I think the first and most important thing you need to learn in school to prepare you for work is to learn how to learn, right? And I feel like that's maybe a little bit of a little bit of a cop out, but I don't really think that's true, because the reality is there's no amount of courses that you can take in school that's going to perfectly prepare you for work life, right? You're always going to run into more technologies, more applications, more concepts that you just didn't cover. And it doesn't matter whether you go to Northeastern, right, which is more technical, or you go to Mount Holyoke, or you go to some place which is like like a boot camp. Like there's always still going to be like some stuff you you didn't learn. So the most important thing is figure out, how can I personally learn effectively? Because everybody has their own particular way of learning, right? Do I learn best when somebody else is helping me? Do I learn best by watching a video? Do I learn best when I just read, a walkthrough and try to follow that? Do I learn best on Udemy or Coursera or, Khan Academy or whatever else, right? Do I learn best when I just give myself a whole day, like freeform, like take a project and just trying to do it, whatever it is, starting from scratch? That's honestly the most important skill you need to figure out while you're in college is, what's effective for me? How do I figure out A, what do I need to learn? And B, how do I actually do it? And then C, how do I remember that material going forwards? That's far and away the most important thing. Because honestly, I get asked this question by co-ops all the time, where it's like, hey, for my next job, like what should I prioritize over the summer while I'm in school? Like, should I learn React? I feel like that's really common now. Should I learn JavaScript? Should I learn TypeScript? Should I learn SQL? Should I learn AWS? I'm like, these things are all helpful, but like there's always going to be a grab bag of like random things you're going to end up needing to learn, and a lot of this stuff you can learn pretty quickly in like a week. So the most important thing is to work on yourself. The second thing I would say is that when you do apply to an employer, remember that every employer exists on a spectrum from what they expect out of you in terms of the labor, what you produce, right, versus how much they expect to teach you, right? There are plenty of employers out there that use co-ops interns as essentially cheap labor, right? Where they're like, hey, I expect you to come in knowing all of the skills, all the technologies required, come in, and we're like, hey, here's something that probably pretty cool for you to work on, but like we don't have the time or bandwidth to teach you very much, right? You're pretty much on your own, like, go ahead, here's the code base, get started, right? And there are employers on the opposite end of the spectrum where it's like, hey, we never expect for you to produce anything of value while you're here. This is entirely a 100% learning experience. Like if you get anything done, great, but like our goal is to teach you. And obviously most employers are somewhere in the middle, right? But if you're coming from, for example, Mount Holyoke, and you have not a lot of personal experience, no work experience, you should be looking for an employer who is much more on the teaching side than someone who is looking on the output side, which is obviously going to limit your opportunities, right? Because you're like, hey, this company is doing something really cool, like cryptocurrency, for example. But if it's a 6-person shop, that's probably not the best place for you to start your career, right? They probably don't have a lot of bandwidth to be able to teach you compared to a much larger organization. But if it's too large, maybe like everything becomes very formulaic and it becomes like big corporation feel, and that's not very good either. So that's my best advice in terms of, how do you align with where you are right now and being realistic about how much help do you need and making sure you have an employer that matches those needs.
Angel?
So one question that I think we've kind of been getting bits and pieces of the answer for is that I want to get a full answer for is, what is it like to work at PowerAdvocate?
To clarify, do you mean like how we operate like day to day, like our day-to-day responsibilities, or just like how it feels to work there, like company culture? Like what is it that you're curious about?
I think company culture, and if you could spend a little time talking about your day to day, that'd be amazing.
Okay, I can start with this one. I've been here for like 3.5 months now. I would describe the company culture as like very collaborative, strong mentorship program. I feel like the workplace is also sustainable. We don't have like these super hard deadlines usually where we're like working overtime all the time. And so I think it's a great learning environment, first of all. A lot of pair programming, a lot of collaboration between different teams. That's kind of how like I feel the company culture is like just very people focused. In terms of like my day-to-day work, I spend most of my day pair programming with my teammates. Usually we're assigned like a story, and then two of us will like pair a lot to get the story done. But there's also a lot of room for picking up other responsibilities. So for example, I was on the co-op recruiting team, and so I got to also be involved in like reviewing resumes, interviewing people. This was another kind of like outside responsibility, like preparing this presentation. So that's like how my day-to-day usually works.
I will also chime in as the other co-op. I completely agree with Megan. Everyone's very kind and very helpful. And I have found that really everyone like at PowerAdvocate just wants me to learn and succeed. And it's a place that I've really enjoyed growing. I also, for my day-to-day, I don't do paired programming quite as much because I'm on the Devops team, which is more about infrastructure. So it's a lot of like IT work. So it's kind of like a combination of IT and software, if that makes any sense. So I'll do a lot of like quality of life changes to our like internal programs, or I'll do tickets, or I'll like do like some like a presentation on explaining how some of our like internal stuff works, so that everyone can get it. And so that's kind of like my day-to-day.
All right, I'll go. So I was a co-op who then came back full-time. So clearly it is a job that I really wanted to come back to for a lot of reasons. But the two biggest reasons is, it's pretty corny to say, is like the people, obviously, and especially just in such a collaborative environment, is very different from the other two software engineering like internships that I had. And it's something I really enjoyed, having someone to always, or not always work with, but having the opportunity to work with a bunch of different people all the time. Like I really love the feel of like pairing with someone and figuring out what they're good at, what I'm good at, and how we can kind of feed off of each other to get the best output from that. And then the other big thing that I really love is feeling empowered. So like just based on the size of the company, it's not too big where you feel like you're not really doing anything meaningful. It's not quite startup level. It's somewhere in the middle where I still really, I see the impact that I'm doing, and I'm allowed to make the impact wherever I want to. There is a lot of openness to working on what you really want to work on. There's a lot of options for when, like recently we had a lot of new like restructuring with our teams and new epics, we call like our larger projects, like started up, and I kind of had an opportunity to say like, all right, what epics sound really interesting to you? Kind of had that opportunity to pick out a few options that I could be put onto. And just something that if there is like sometimes there might be some big story that's like, oh, I'm just a software engineer one. Should I really be able to take this really difficult story? Like, yeah, you can, even if you're a co-op, if you feel ready. You have all the chance to make the most out of what you do. You're not just told this is what you work on. Now do this for a couple months and then move on to the next thing. It really is what you want to make of it. And I think it's really important, especially for career growth, which is something I didn't really think about when I was a co-op, but now as a full-timer, that is something I have to think a lot about. And I'm really happy with the decision I made to come back here full-time.
We have a question in the chat based on something that Megan said before Jacqueline's question. Megan, you mentioned stories. So does PowerAdvocate use Agile methods?
I am actually like not good with these terms, so I'll let someone else answer this.
Yes, but I'm also not that great. We used to do Scrum. I mean, we call it Agile, but we also call it kind of Kanban. I don't, Cindy, do you have a better explanation?
Yes. Because Megan and Mike joined after we transitioned from Scrum to Kanban. So I understand that we didn't give them the full blown of education of Scrum. So the company, I forgot, Alex, before I joined, they're already like trying to do Scrum, and we all love Scrum. And then we have practiced Scrum for almost a decade, I would say, maybe less than a decade. And then the company continuously evaluate how we work, right? So that's why I like working in PowerAdvocate, because we care to innovate and change to work better. We don't just stuck in like just pick one thing, oh it worked, and then just stuck there forever. No, that we care how to improve. So the Kanban is more like an iteration, like not waterfall, but like an iteration in a 2 weeks. And there's a Scrum activity. I don't want to go through a whole education of Scrum, but the difference between Scrum and Kanban is Scrum is iteration, Kanban is continuously deliver business value. So we noticed, even though Kanban create a nice structure that we follow how we deliver software to the business, like every 2 weeks we commit to a certain story, we work on those story, and then we will try to deliver those story by the end of 2 weeks. And then after 2 weeks, we look at what other feature we need to develop, and then commit it again and repeat like that. Versus Kanban is different. You pick the highest priority story and then you work on it until it finish. Doesn't matter it takes 2 weeks, 4 weeks, or only 1 day. Doesn't matter. You work until it's finished. Then it's put it ready to be released. So that's why it allows us to be released anytime and be flexible. So we kind of transition from Scrum to Kanban, but I would say it's not exactly like Kanban. We take the benefit of both to make it work for our company. But it's Agile. So both Scrum and Kanban are the implementation of Agile. So both of them are Agile methodology. Any question?
Yeah, can I go ahead? Okay, so I was just wondering, what's the procedure for if you want to intern with PowerAdvocate?
Well, I can speak to this, something that Alex and I have been a part of. So like for a while, like we've been, for software development specifically, been mostly partnered with just Northeastern, and then we branched out a little last year to another school. But now, especially right now, we're working on, we call our like DEI initiative, which is why we are speaking to Mount Holyoke here, and it's something we are now planning a internship opportunity where we know that like it's pretty late, like summer's coming up, so there might not be a lot of people that would apply, but we're open to taking on a couple people for this upcoming summer, and it's something that we want to have a really great relationship with the school going forward to continue doing this, hopefully. So that I don't know if we have the official, job description out yet. Alex, you got it?
Yeah, I can jump in here. So yeah, as Mike says, historically we've worked exclusively at Northeastern. We recognize for a variety of reasons we want a lot more diversity in the types of folks that we bring to the organization, right? And as happy as we are with Northeastern folks, obviously all the ones on this call right now are Northeastern graduates. We want to have a lot of the voices, a lot of different opinions. Obviously, it's really cool that Mount Holyoke also has like a really classic liberal arts education, which I think brings a fantastic perspective to our work and for a lot of different ways. So the short answer for what the procedure is we're currently crafting, we actually have already crafted a special summer internship for Mount Holyoke. We have all the paperwork, everything, we got it approved, everything's like good to go. And we are meeting with Roshanda, I believe, who manages this from the Mount Holyoke side on Tuesday afternoon, I want to say, and we're going to get it officially posted. So we're also happy to forward the material to, you folks, for anybody who's interested in making sure, like, hey, double check, like, when does that get posted? Like, when is that available? Like, letting you know, and we obviously have positions available, right? Starting basically right after you get out of school.
Yeah, so if you needed any incentive to stay on top of CS Society updates, this might be a reason. So we'll definitely be sharing information out as we get it and as soon as that's available. Okay,
Does that
so
also
it
kind of
is
answer the question
now.
in the chat? Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, Mai,
There was one question in
do
the
you
chat,
have,
yeah.
does that answer your question, or did you mean in a different context?
No, I think that's answered my questions. It is a little bit sad that I think we cannot, some of us cannot like work this summer because we are not eligible for the CBT yet. So I'm not sure if you really recruit members for the next summer.
So we're planning on making this an annual thing. So obviously, if it doesn't work out this summer, it will be available next summer as well. I know some folks who have like international restrictions. It can get a little tricky regarding whether or not they can get like, I think it's OPT. I'm not like super familiar with all the paperwork in that regard, but we've had people who are international students who have worked for us before in co-ops, so we still support that. It's not a problem whatsoever. Something that you might be interested in if you can't or don't want to do the internship is that we're also planning on offering shadowing opportunities. So having students come in for like about a week. We have the structure still a little fuzzy, but we have it already in the works, where folks will come in for a week. It's not paid, but it's like, hey, what's a day in the life like? So you shadow around developers for the whole week, and possibly potentially have rotations on DevOps and data science as well. So you can kind of see like, hey, what do we work on? Like, what's it like to pull a story down, to work on a feature, to do web development, to work in a professional environment? Again, it would not be a paid thing. It's a very, very short term, 1 week stint, but it could be very helpful at looking at, is this a career I want to pursue? Is this the type of company I want to pursue? That kind of stuff. Hopefully that's helpful.
No, that sounds super great. Just that, like, is a in-person experience, right?
So because of COVID, everything is planned to be remote currently, because we, like, as 90% of the companies out there, I think, are still not back in the office. I suspect we will be back in the office this year. My bet is late summer is probably when we're looking at that. So for now, all the things that we're talking about regarding both the internship and the shadowing would all be 100% remote. So we're working out the logistics to get all that to work out just fine.
Okay, so the last thing is, how can we contact you? I mean, how can we receive all of the informations? And if we have some questions regarding those information later when we receive them, how can we contact or how can we ask you?
So probably the easiest way is for us to pass all the information on to CS Society, which I believe we are already currently doing. You're also free to reach out to any of the people from the PowerAdvocate side today, Cindy, Megan, Emily, Mike, or myself. Obviously, we're probably all have LinkedIn profiles. You can contact us directly if you so wish, but obviously we want to make sure the resources are available to you. So we'll probably pass them on to CS Society. I would hope CS Society would pass it on to you. Rashonda will probably pass it on to you as well. And there's a lot of different ways that you can make sure that to get it to work.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Definitely. And just to clarify, does PowerAdvocate sponsor international students for the summer internships?
This is where the terminology gets a little weird. So I know for full-time, like after you graduated, right, when you're no longer, being a student and working side by side, we generally don't sponsor H-1Bs. So that's historically been our stance. However, we're starting to also soften on that. So that's also a possibility going forwards. I wouldn't close the door completely, but if you were somebody where it's like, hey, because I know this is really important for international students who want to stay in the United States, right? They want to intern someplace that they have a good experience, and then when they graduate, they can work there full time and be like, I know you're going to sponsor me all set. So I don't want to, mislead anyone about like the realistic chances, because I think it's very important for them to get a company that they're like, hey, this will lock me in and I'm good to go. So in that regard, in the last few years, we have not been sponsoring H-1Bs. However, we are reconsidering that decision, but I cannot guarantee that by any means. For the full-time work while you're a student, which I believe is a different type of paperwork, I believe, yes, we do. As far as I know, there's no issue with us at sponsoring that. Hopefully that answered the question. As not an immigration lawyer and not someone who works in HR, I hope I answered the question well enough.
That sounds great. Does anyone have any last questions before we wrap up? Oh, and also, if it's okay with everybody, I can also share the emails or LinkedIn profiles of all the panelists who have been speaking today as well. So you guys can reach out to them and ask any questions if you have them later.
yeah, if you have any like internship specific questions, then reach out to either me or Alex would know the best, because like we kind of made the plan for that, so we can speak to that the most.
Oh yeah, Mike put a good comment in the chat. Our internships are paid. The shadowing,
Right.
like 1 week thing, is the only opportunity that is not paid. Everything else is paid.
Okay, if there are no more questions, then I want to give a very huge thank you to all the PowerAdvocate engineers and everyone who came to speak to us. We really appreciate, and we're very excited to see what you have to offer us in the time to come. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks everyone for attending.
Yeah, thanks
asking
for
really
all
good
the great
questions.
questions.